here. What I'm doing is grabbing from the base and then very gently sliding up, not to break any of the roots. Hey guys, welcome back to the homestead. My name is Mike and I'm back with another video, and today I've got a cool one. We're actually going to be planting our spring garden into the bed behind me here. So it's just now becoming spring here in New Jersey. I know some of you folks down south are well into your growing season, and some of you guys up north are still very much in winter like we were a couple weeks ago. And don't worry, the spring is coming because it's just now arriving in Jersey, and we have a lot of great signs that spring is coming. We have flowers on our early fruit trees like plums. We have the weeds kind of popping their heads out and trying to get early pollination. Bees are out, which is great. Some of my previous honeybee videos, I show you the bees are very busy, and it's time for us to get busy in the garden as well. So let's get to planting some cold weather crops that will be ready to harvest before that heat of the summer comes. And I'll show you guys exactly what we're doing in the greenhouse. So standing here in the greenhouse, I can say it's very warm in here, which is great. It gave us the head start to the season that we wanted by allowing us to grow our cold weather garden seeds earlier in the season when we really couldn't have done it out in the beds. But with that being said, the greenhouse is now becoming too warm for these cold weather crops, and we really want to get these into the ground so they can experience the cooler nights and warm days of spring as they should be, and how they're designed to grow. And when I say cold weather things, I'm really talking about brassicas, cold weather broccoli, lettuces, kales. I'm talking about onions, which really are hardy and can tolerate cold weather. Things like that generally want to be planted and harvested in cooler weather. And when the sun of the summer comes, these plants typically don't do as well. They sometimes lettuces will bolt, meaning they want to go to seed because of that warm weather, and that's not what we want as gardeners. We want it to be a nice leafy head of lettuce. So with all that, this is the time of year to get these into the ground, and that's what we're doing right now. So before we actually get out into the garden and start planting these, I want to just show you these onions and how great they really did. Now, this isn't the only way to do onions. I wanted to make a note that you could actually start a bunch of onion seeds in one cell and then actually separate them out once you get into the garden. As you guys can see in this particular tray, there's about 2 onion plants in each and every cell, and I'm not going to kill one to get the other like you would normally do with tomatoes or more delicate vegetables. In this case, we could actually separate these onions and plant them as individual plants spread out properly in the garden bed, because onions are so hardy and their roots are so wiry. So I'll show you when we get into the garden bed what I'm talking about. So we're going to be planting in this garden bed for one major reason, because if you guys can see the bright sun hitting this bed, and then we'll scroll over to these beds over here, they're in the shade, and in the spring this pretty much stays this way for the whole first half of the day because of these big pine trees. They shade out the sun, and it causes these beds over here to stay cooler and less sunny than this one over here, which gets sun all day. So the key is planting a spring garden in a sunny bed so that the sun can work to your favor and warm up the soil a little bit quicker and let the plants kind of get into growing mode more so than a shady bed. So some food for thought, something to consider when you're picking your spring garden bed. All right, so before we jump into the actual planting of the garden itself, I want to go over garden tools, or tools that we're going to be using to help us achieve this goal of planting our garden. So starting off is the garden trowel. You guys are familiar with the garden trowel. If you're a gardener, you probably have 1 or 2 floating around. I always recommend spend the money, buy a good one, and it'll last many years for you and many garden seasons. So this one's from Bare Bones. I'm not affiliated with them. It's a good brand. This one's been around for a couple years and I've enjoyed it so far. So garden trowel, definitely a must-have, but we're not going to be using this particular tool today. Today we're going to be using what's called the hori hori. And now this is a gardening knife, or a Japanese gardening knife. And what it does is it fits a couple different purposes. Number one, it does everything that the garden trowel will do in the way of kind of scooping soil out of the way. It has a rounded belly to it that can grab and pull soil out, but it also has a sharp cutting edge and a serrated knife edge as well for cutting roots, slicing rope, trimming back, trellis, things like that. So if you guys have been around and followed the homesteading channel, you know that I love tools that are multi-purpose, and this hori hori fits that perfectly. So I'm actually going to be using this tool today, and I recommend, if you haven't tried using a hori hori, go get one, check it out. There's cheap ones on Amazon, there's cheap ones at the big box stores. You could really find these things everywhere. You just kind of have to look for them. They don't stand right out like a garden trowel would. The last piece of equipment, or the last tool we're going to be using, is just a straight edge, something that's going to space out the plants. I'm a little bit OCD when it comes to planting my garden. I like everything to be evenly spaced out and have a great aesthetic appeal to it. I frequently have company come over, and I'm very proud of my gardens, and I want to show everybody these gardens. So having the plants equally spaced out and kind of following a straight line makes me feel happy. But you guys don't have to do that. I mean, if you want to eye it out and just place the plants as they go, that's perfectly fine. As long as the sun is touching the soil, your plants are going to grow fine. The plants don't have a preference on if they're straight or a little bit crooked, or one's here, one's there. It really doesn't matter. But in this case, I'm going to be using just a board to follow a good straight line and keep things as organized as I can. So we're going to get started with onions first, and this is super exciting. I want to show you guys a little trick that I learned, and that's by actually overseeding each individual little cell here and letting a bunch of onion seeds kind of take and germinate, and then separating them as you plant them into the garden. So let me show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So looking at the onion seedlings themselves, you can see onions like this one right here. There's actually two different onion plants growing in the same cell. So what you could do is literally just pull the onions right out of the cell and then separate the two plants. And you could see the roots are intact. They're very wiry and hardy, and they do just fine. So you could take one onion, you could take one cell with multiple onion plants, separate them into as many plants as you need to plant. So this is how I like to do onions, because you get more bang for your buck in the terms of real estate inside of the little cells. All right, guys, so let me bring you in close. I want to show you exactly what I'm doing and how I'm transplanting these onions into the garden. So here's an onion right here. What I'm doing is grabbing from the base and then very gently sliding up, not to break any of the roots. Now, as you can see here, that's all the roots intact for this little seedling. And now, to do this one-handed, I have to place it down. I'm just kind of drilling a little hole with my finger. You could use the tools as well. Then what I'm doing is I'm taking my seedling, I'm setting it into the hole, and then I'm just kind of like pinching around the soil, just like this, just giving it a pinch, bringing more soil in around it, kind of very gently packing it down, and then I like to just give it a slight tug just to pull all the roots up and in, and make sure that no one's like getting smushed or crossed over. And then that's a perfect transplant right there. So it's a little difficult to see, but that's how I'm leaving it. And I've done pretty much all of the bed this way, and the onion seeds are so small you can barely see them, but they're gonna really grow up and out, and they'll look just like the garlic that's already planted in the bed here. So I'll show you guys that one more time. We're just very delicately pulling our onion seed out. We're kind of drilling a little hole. Sorry for all the shaking, but we're drilling a little hole in the bed here. We're setting all those roots down in there, and then we're kind of pinching the soil around those roots, just like that. And then very gently patting it down, giving it a good sturdy base to grow into. And just like that, we have all of our onions planted, and we are moving on. So that's about half of the garden bed done. Now the other half of this bed here, I'm going to be doing leafy greens, and those are my spinaches, my broccolis, Brussels sprouts, kale, and last but not least, cabbage. So that's what these two trays have, just different types of varieties, things that we like. If you guys want to know more about the specific varieties that I'm planting, leave me a comment down below and I will respond exactly what we're doing. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start on this side of the bed and I'll work my way toward the onions with all of the leafy greens that we love to eat in salads and things like that. Now the reason I keep all of my leafy greens together and kind of separate from the onions is because we're going to be harvesting these sporadically throughout the season. We're going to be taking leaves here and there, making salads, and we don't necessarily harvest the onions until they're ready to go. So that's kind of like a one-time harvest over there, hence it's on the farther side of the bed, and this side of the bed will be our you know, easy access, come and grab what we need when we need it. So planting the leafy greens is almost the same way as the onions, except what I do is I try to keep the entire root cell like this intact. These roots are a lot less hardy than the onions, and they don't necessarily love to be broken apart and then transplanted as bare root into soil. The more intact you can keep them, the better and happier they'll take to their transplant. So to give you guys a close-up look on how I'm planting my kale is I'm very basically moving my straw mulch out of the way, right? I give myself almost like a little bird's nest I try to make, and then I just come in and I move the soil out of the way about the same size hole as one of the cells that we're going to be pulling out of. So then I pick a kale plant, I come in from the bottom, I kind of pop it up with my finger through the hole in the bottom, and then I very gently lift at the base of the plant itself, trying to keep everything intact, and I grab the whole root cell just like that. And this one has some nice roots growing. It's actually 2 kale plants in there. I'll set it into the hole, try to keeping it as intact as I can, and then same thing as the onions, I'm just kind of pinching the soil around the root cell and bringing it all in together, and that's gonna keep kind of like hug that root ball, but allow those roots to be encouraged to grow into the native soil here that we're planting into. So just like that, I'll actually remove that one seedling. We don't want to grow 2 in the same spot. They'll compete for each other. But that's really it. So now I kind of just like make sure that the soil level's not going to smother the plant, and I leave it just like that. So that's kind of how I'm doing all of these, and it makes for a good transplant. So it also helps me identify where my seedlings are when I keep kind of the nest of mulch moved out of the way, allowing the plant to get sunlight, water, and then as the plant grows taller, I'll push this straw mulch back in around it to prevent weeds from kind of competing. But this is really how easy it is, and I'm gonna keep going. We got a lot more seedlings to plant. All right, and just like that, the garden bed is planted for the early spring crop. There's one more step here, and I'll show you that now. Bonus content here, this is how you wash your hands in the garden. Get all that dirt off before you go inside. And this way you don't leave dirty fingerprints everywhere and your wife doesn't get mad at you. So this is a pro tip that goes beyond gardening, guys. Keep your wife happy and everyone else will be happy. So the last piece to the puzzle here is to very lightly water everything in. I really don't like to flood it because all the roots are so tiny and fragile that you could actually damage the roots, but you definitely do want to get some nice watering on top so that you water in the little seedlings. Now don't forget how small these roots really are. It's not going to take a whole lot of water to water them in, so I just kind of very easily go back and forth with a shower head nozzle like you can see here, and I just kind of give them a nice watering, like as if it was like a little gentle rainstorm. And that's very important, but you don't want to skip this part. So with all of that, guys, this is pretty much the end of the video here. So if you're new to the channel, I appreciate you coming by. Consider subscribing for future content just like this. I do all types of content from gardening to fig trees to fruit trees to general homesteading stuff. So welcome aboard, and if you're a returning viewer, thanks for coming back. Hit that thumbs up, and I will see you guys on the next video. See you later.